Hi everyone! Today I'm sharing a spread in my Life Crafted album featuring two different types of flips and flaps, and I'm documenting one of my favorite parts of our trip to Vancouver last year, which was the awesome food that we had there. I'm starting with the flip up that I'm making for the left side of my spread, and I have this digital traveler's notebook pattern paper from the new Crave collection from Citrus Twist Kits. And I'm going to be cutting this paper along that wavy line and making it so that the top part flips up and the bottom part flips down to reveal some photos. And you'll see that I've printed this out at 8.5 inches tall, but I haven't cut off the top and bottom parts of the piece of white cardstock that I printed this on. And that's because I'm going to be using some of those areas to create hinges for my flaps. So here I'm measuring 1/8 of an inch below the top edge of that pattern paper and making a score mark there. Then I'm measuring 1/2 inch above that score mark and making a second score mark there. And I'm actually going to be cutting along that second score mark later. I just thought this might save me a bit of measuring later on and might be a bit easier to show in the video as well. After that, I made the same score marks along the bottom of my pattern paper, so 1/8 of an inch above the bottom edge of that pattern and then 1/2 inch below that. And here's where I'm cutting at those two score marks to leave just the 1/2 inch hinge on the top and bottom of my pattern paper. And those are going to form the hinges to attach to the back of my Life Crafted album page to make those flips and flaps. Before I go to print out my photos, I'm just cutting along this wavy line here to see how tall each of these flaps will be so that I can take that into account when I'm deciding which photos to print out and what dimensions I need to print them out at. And through the magic of video editing, I'm back with all of my pieces printed out and ready to go. I've also cut out the spoon, fork, and knife cut file from the Citrus Twist Cravings cut files, and I sized that just so that it's a bit under 8.5 inches tall, and I'm going to be using that for my second type of flips and flaps on top of that blue pattern paper that I printed out from that same Crave collection, as well as one of the 3x4 journaling cards that I resized to be just a bit narrower and taller so that I can fit that on my Life Crafted album page beside that cut file. And in terms of photos, I've printed out 3 circle photos. These are about 2.5 inches in diameter, and I've sized them small enough so that they'll fit right behind those utensil icons. I've also printed out a strip of 4 landscape photos with my favorite types of foods that we had during the trip, and that's going to be adhered behind these 2 wavy flaps. And I've printed out some other photos that I'm going to adhere to the undersides of those flaps as well. So the one with 3 photos in that strip is going to go on the top flap, which is a bit larger, and the one with 2 photos is going to go on the bottom flap, which is a bit shorter. Before I did that, I noticed that the way that I scored my flaps, there is a slight gap between them when they're closed. So I'm just going to fill in that gap with some vellum. So I'm cutting my piece of vellum here to be the same width of my 2 flaps. And then I'm going to trace along the top of this wavy edge so that I can get that same curve in the top edge of my vellum. But before I attach that to my flap, I'm going to use that same edge to cut along the bottom of the photo strip that's going to be adhered onto the back of this flap. So that's the one with the 2 photos here. And unfortunately, I'm going off camera a bit here so that I can make sure that I'm cutting right along that curve. But you'll see that once I'm done, this flap is going to flip down and the vellum is going to be sandwiched between my flap and my photo. And the flap is just going to get attached to the bottom of my Life Crafted album page where I've adhered my photo. For the top flap, I don't need any vellum, so I'm just attaching my photo straight down onto the back of that flap, then cutting along the edge so that I can get that wavy edge again. And similarly to the bottom flap, I'm just using some 3/8 inch score tape to attach this 1/2 inch hinge to the back of my Life Crafted album page. And here you can see the full flip up in action with the photos on both the flaps. Just a note as well that the photo in the top of the top flap and the very bottom photo of the bottom flap is going to end up having to be cut in half. So when I was going through my photos, I did make sure to pick one that I wouldn't mind cutting in half for those two portions there. Moving on to the right page of my layout, I'm going to be scoring each of these circles here right where they meet this right strip, where you're supposed to be punching your holes to put this in your album. So each of these circles is going to end up being a separate flap that will flip up and reveal a circle-shaped photo underneath. I'm going to adhere part of this right-sided strip down onto my pattern paper, and I didn't want that whole width of the strip to be adhered onto the pattern paper because I was worried I wouldn't be able to fit my journaling card on the left side of that cut file there if I was to keep that whole width of the strip there. But at the same time, I didn't want to cut off too much of that strip because that's essentially all that's going to be holding this cut file onto my page. So to kind of compromise, I decided to score in the middle of that strip, and I'm going to adhere half of it to the back of my spread where it's not going to be seen, and the other half hanging over the front of my page. And I'm just going to use my 1/8 inch score tape because the 3/8 score tape is just a bit too wide for this strip here. Once that's done, I'm just using my 2.5 inch circle punch from EK Success to punch out all of my photos. And I do want to make sure that my journaling card is adhered down so that the words aren't covered by any of the photos. So just keeping in mind where I want to position all of my elements. And after that, I can then use those utensil circles to make sure that my circle photos are placed in the right place on my spread so that they're covered up by the utensils when these flaps are closed and approximately centered for where the icon is. Once that's done, I can apply some more score tape to the other side of that cut file strip and adhere that down onto my page to secure everything into place. And that way it's just the circle part with the utensil that's flipping up instead of that whole strip there. In terms of the embellishments, I decided to add these little banners that say journaling entry number 1, 2, 3, and these came from the Crave die cut ephemera pack. And these correspond with the top 3 favorite foods that I had during our trip that I mentioned in my journaling spot there. Because the banners are going to be slightly overhanging the edges of the circles, I did make sure that I didn't get any adhesive onto the left side of the embellishments, and that way I don't accidentally glue them down so that the flap is glued down as well. And for the left page of my spread, I decided to keep that theme of the circles going. So I'm using this wreath floral die cut piece and using that to frame this circle chipboard sticker that says food for the soul. Both of those came from the Crave mini kit. And because the bottom flap was looking a bit empty as well, I decided to do a bit of tone on tone and added a purple chipboard sticker that says go with your gut, which I thought totally matched my spread about eating way too much food. And that completes my layout for today. I hope you enjoyed these 2 different techniques for including interactive flips and flaps in your Life Crafted albums. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments down below. If you liked this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, and be sure to subscribe for more process videos and crafty inspiration. Thanks so much for watching!